I think without further ado, we're ready to get started with Andy Beaton, the sky this month.
Okay, sky this month, starting now till the next meeting, March 21st. I'm a good deal happier this month than I was last month because I've actually seen some sky, so I feel like I'm an astronomer again. What we have coming up tonight, the big picture, planets, the moon, galaxies, comets and meteors, a variable star because I love variable stars, and whatever's going on in spaceflight this month. Starting off with the big picture, around early dark, we've got all the usual winter constellations, so we still have our nice view of Taurus and Orion, the Orion Nebula, Gemini, all the good winter stuff still there to see. Unfortunately, not much in the way of planets yet. Getting up in the morning, that's a different thing. We've got our spring and early summer constellations by then. We also have a nice string of planets showing up here. We've got Jupiter, we've got Mars, we've got Saturn, Pluto, yeah, sort of. We've got Haumea and Makemake if you've got a huge telescope or you just want to have a look at the area where they are. I don't know anybody here who has a telescope capable of seeing them, but you never know. You know, people go on trips to see big telescopes down in the States, and you can always put it on the list of things to see. The nights are getting shorter. We're coming up on the equinox. Tonight, twilight ends at twilight ends at 7:12. That's when we get our good observing starting, and it starts again at 5:16 in the morning. By next meeting, it'll be 7:43 by the time it gets dark, and 4:24 when it starts getting light again. So your all-night observing sessions are going to get shorter and shorter. Important dates coming up in the next month. The new moon on March 17th. We've got daylight savings time starting on March 11th. If you're the kind of person who records all your observations in universal time, you'll be adding on 4 hours instead of 5 hours to your observing logs. The spring equinox on March 20th. If you're the kind of person who's going to be traveling out east, or you're the kind of person who likes watching astronomical events on the internet, the moon will be occulting Aldebaran. Not really visible around here, but it is visible in some parts of Canada and most of Europe, I believe. If you check your observer's handbook, which I'm sure everybody does, it'll tell you that for the first 2 weeks after the beginning of the new month, the zodiacal light will be visible in the western sky after twilight. For those who haven't seen the zodiacal light, it's dust in the plane of the solar system being illuminated by the sun. It's a difficult thing to see. I've seen it twice in my life, and that's after an awful lot of observing. But it's pretty cool when you do see it. Coming up this month for the moon, we've got the first quarter in 2 days, full moon on March 2nd, last quarter on the 9th, and the new moon on the 17th coming up. For people who are keen on trying to find the Lunar X, it's the next chance to do that will be tomorrow night, actually tomorrow afternoon at 1:07 in the afternoon. Assuming it's clear, you should be able to see it with any telescope, any decent-sized telescope. The moon's pretty visible during the daytime. For those who haven't seen the Lunar X before, I actually dug up a picture of it this time. Whoops, here, not too far, here we go. And if you take a look right here, when you get that certain angle of light at the right time, you get an X formed out of the rims of a few craters there. It's a cool thing to see. It's a fun thing to show people if you want to impress them with your your astronomical knowledge. Seeing it won't really gain you any certificates or anything, but it's cool to see it. While I'm discussing the moon, I should also say that it's still a good time to work on your Lunar Explore the Universe certificate. It's still kind of chilly out at night. It's still a good time if you want to go out for a quick observing session with your binoculars, look at the moon, and head back in again. Planets coming up. Mercury and Venus are finally going to appear in the western sky once we get closer to the next meeting. On March 15th, it'll be at its greatest elongation. That's the highest point in the sky. We're going to see it for the next few months. It'll be reasonably close to Venus throughout the month, and that's going to help to spot it because it's pretty faint. It's only there in the twilight. It's not a trivial observation, but it can be seen. Venus is making a good appearance. It's coming back to the evening sky, and it's going to be more and more prominent throughout the summer. So this is your chance to start observing it anyway. March 5th and 18th, there will be conjunctions between Venus and Mercury. So if you are going to try and find Mercury, that'll be a good guidepost to try and find it. The morning planets, for those of us willing to wake up early, we get our, once again, parade of Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn. Last month, Mars was Jupiter's companion. This month, it's heading over towards Saturn. There is a lot of noise going on the internet about how this is going to be one of the best years in a long time to see Mars. It will probably be the largest in apparent diameter it's been since 2003. So if you have an observing project ahead of you to measure Mars as it approaches and moves away again, it's a good time to start. The moon will be beside Jupiter on the 7th and Saturn on the 10th and the 11th, both reasonably close passes. So if you're looking for scenic photographs, that would be a good time to take them. Sadly, none of them are going to rise very high from our point of view here. If you're thinking about amazing detailed astrophotographs, amazing views of the clouds of Jupiter, this might not be a good time for you. Now, something that was going around on the internet yesterday, I got an email saying that the Great Red Spot was disappearing for the first time in recorded history. I don't know whether it's really going to happen or not. The source I got was Newsweek, which I don't consider to be a reputable astronomical journal. But they got the information from somewhere, and it's definitely worth watching for. The last time I saw the Great Red Spot, it was kind of the Great Salmon Pink Spot, and I understand it's getting paler and smaller as time goes on. Whether it's really going to disappear or not, I don't know, but if you're looking for an observing project, try seeing the Great Red Spot before it disappears, or try recording observations of it as it comes back. The other planets, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and Ceres. Uranus is in Pisces, getting very close to the sun. You'll be able to see it, but it's getting more and more deep into twilight. You're going to have a hard time seeing any kind of details. You're going to have a hard time seeing the moons, but it's still visible. Neptune's in conjunction behind the sun on March 4th, so we're not going to see any Neptune for the next month. If you're up early in the morning, right before twilight, Pluto will be appearing over the horizon. If you have a good low eastern horizon and it's a really clear night and you're looking over a lake or something and not over a city, you might have a chance to see it. It is very close to the Milky Way, so you're going to have a hard time spotting it in a single viewing. It's going to be a very faint dot among a million faint dots. The best way would probably be take a photograph and compare it to a map, or try and make a really accurate drawing and go back in a week and see if anything has moved. Ceres, my favorite minor planet, is just about directly overhead in the evening now, just under 8th magnitude. Should be easy to spot with binoculars if you have any kind of decent map. And it's moving pretty quickly, about 10 arc minutes a day. So if you have interest in tracking an asteroid as some kind of science project, then it's a good target for it. We're getting away from the Milky Way. We don't have the overhead Milky Way from in Cygnus in the summer. We don't have the Orion Milky Way in the winter. So we're kind of looking out of the Milky Way and seeing into the depths. So there's a lot of good galaxies this time of year. We've got big clusters in Virgo and Canis Vegetisi. We've got prominent, obvious bright galaxies, M81 and 82 in Ursa Major, M87 in Virgo, 65 and 66 in Leo, 51 in Canis Vegetisi. They aren't really great urban targets. They're kind of too diffuse for that. But if you're out under dark skies anywhere, they're bright, prominent galaxies. With a reasonable telescope, you can see all kinds of structure in them, so they're worth looking for. Now, my favorite spring deep sky object, which is always worth looking for, is Markarian's chain. It's a long chain of galaxies in Virgo. As we get into the late evening around now, it's going to be just about directly overhead to the south a bit. This is it here. We've got a whole string of galaxies coming along here, M84, M86, the eyes, and a whole bunch of other Messier objects all in the neighborhood. A decent wide field telescope will get them all in the same field of view. It's really the best time of the year to look for it. If you're doing your Messier list, you're going to get a whole bunch of objects all at once. So I would advise, especially beginning observers who haven't seen a lot of galaxies, get out there with a pair of binoculars or a telescope and have a look. If you have kids, or you're showing the telescope to kids, these guys here make a smiley face that children find amusing, and I do too when I'm drunk. A question I am often asked when I'm out with my telescope is how far you can see. People are used to the idea they can see the moon. It's a few 100,000 miles away. And, planets that are many millions of miles away, but they don't really grasp that there's no upper limit to how far you can see. M109, roughly 83 million light years away. That's a pretty common answer for most of us. Anybody who's done the Messier list, it's a bright galaxy, it's pretty far away. That's a good round number. But I'm assuming that being keen and dedicated observers, as we all are, we would like to see something better. So this is actually a really good time of the year to look for 3C273. This is the closest quasar to the Milky Way. It's about just over 2.4 billion light years away. If you're looking at Markarian's chain, M61, which we mentioned was right below it, and a bit further below that we have 3C273. It's not only the closest quasar, it's the brightest one, usually between 12 and 13.5 magnitude. 12.5 to 12.9 is normal. It looks like a star, which means it's really good at getting through light pollution. If you check your observer's handbook, it will tell you that something that bright you can see with a 4-inch telescope. But really, I would say a 6 or 8-inch telescope is a more realistic number. I've seen it with an 8-inch telescope. I live 3 blocks from Honested's, or where Honested's used to be, which gives you a rough idea of just how bad the light pollution is where I do my observing. But I am able to see the object without too much difficulty. Now, the extra cool thing about 3C273 is its brightness is variable. And if you're interested in contributing to science, measuring its brightness and sending the observations into the AAVSO, that's the American Association of Variable Star Observers. See, I'm doing my acronyms. They will make good use of that information. So I don't think we have any meteor showers coming up this month of any interest whatsoever. There's a weak gamma normids if you're going to be in the southern hemisphere anytime all month, but even that's a really lousy one. We've got a couple faintish comets, both of them discovered by pan-stars overhead for the next month. N6 in Ursa Major. It's growing brighter. It'll peak around 11.3 in late April. And M1, currently in Aquila, peaking on June 28th at 9.3. That one will probably be the more interesting of the 2 comets. It might even get bright enough to have a tail. The other, it's interesting if you like looking for comets. And comets are interesting, but you're not going to get a spectacular Halley's Comet kind of view out of it. Now, I do love variable stars, so everybody gets a variable star every month. This month, it's SY Cancri. Like the other ones I like to recommend, it's a cataclysmic variable star. What that means is you've got 2 stars orbiting around each other. One is a white dwarf, one's a giant. The white dwarf is slurping material off through its stronger gravitational field. As the gas spirals into it, it ignites and you get flares of brightness. Currently, it's around 12.8 magnitude. So you probably want an 8-inch telescope or something better if you want to get good observations of it, especially when it's down at its dimmest. Around now, it's just about directly overhead, around 11 p.m. And like always, I urge people to do some variable star observing. It's fun and scientifically useful, and once you get into the habit, it's a good way to drag yourself out and do some observing on those nights when you think, maybe I'll just watch TV. Spaceflight highlights coming up. We have a couple of flight-proven Falcon launches, 3 of them. I'm almost reluctant to call this news at this point. These things are so successful and so frequent that it's getting to be like telling people that a Boeing 777 is taking off from Pearson. March 21st, we have Expedition 55 launching to the ISS. That's coming out of the Soviet, or out of Russia. Sorry, you can tell I'm old. From now to March 21st, we have morning ISS passes. Heavensabove.com is the place to go. I don't know how many people are going to want to drag their kids out to see the space station at 6 in the morning, but if you're up and about for any reason at that time, it's always fun to see it. And news is going around that the US is wants to cancel the budget for the W1 telescope. That's the successor to the Hubble telescope in visual light. We'll see what happens there. The last spaceflight highlight, and I should point out that I am not a paid employee, the producers of Sky Safari, but this is something I took a picture of off my phone. Sky Safari has a orbital elements for Starman in its Tesla Roadster. So you can check its location. I have seen pictures of that people have taken of the Tesla floating through space. I'm not sure it's visible to us at this point, but it's out there. You can at least have a look at the general neighborhood and hum yourself a David Bowie song and imagine what it's like. And that's what we have. Thanks very much. And any questions? Someone's got the microphone, or I guess you could just shout it out and I can repeat it.
Yeah, Andy?
If you update your
event
if you update your Sky Safari for iOS to the latest version, and you orbit the Tesla, you get a little 3D red roadster rotating in space.
All right.
Sorry for that. Yeah, Andy,
Yes.
there's one other event here worth noting. It says here in the March-April issue of Sky News that on Tuesday, March 1st, the full moon or near full moon will nearly occult Regulus. From here, it's only 5 arc minutes above. So
Okay.
that should be a good opportunity for some photos, probably.
Definitely. And if people are traveling, keep an eye on Regulus and the moon at that night. You might see an occultation. Yes.
Just to add a little bit to the morning planets, I was out early in the morning on last weekend, and Mars is just about the same brightness as Antares. In fact, considering they weren't quite at the same height above, I would have had a heck of a time telling the difference apart. So it's kind of neat to look at, and why Antares is called the opposite of Mars.
Right. Okay, that sounds like a good photo opportunity as well. Anyone else? Okay. Thanks very much.